Welcome everyone to yet another wonderful session of Satsang for the Soul with Lee Green, our dear friend of DISO and the Mayan Dreamspell, and a personal friend of mine from the Philippines, an incredible musician who will be bringing us in a moment with her beautiful music. And I am Mark Bentley, tuning in from Western Australia, over here on the other side of the planet. And so Lee, welcome, my dear. How are you feeling today?
Good morning. Feeling great. How are you?
Feeling actually the same. We've got some nice rains outside, very appropriate for today's energy, which we'll touch on after the song. But I'm feeling really good, Lee. I'm feeling really good.
All right. Wonderful. Well, good morning to everyone listening and tuning in right now, and good evening to those who are about to go to sleep on the other side of the world. Let's bring us in for a song. I wanted to sing something from Seal. There used to be a great town alone on the sea. You became the light in the dark side of me. But love remains like a drug that's high like a pill. Did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on a grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on a grave. There is so much a man can tell you, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my pain. To me, you're like a growing addiction that I can't deny. Won't you tell me that it's healthy, babe? Did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on a grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on a grave.
Miss Grain.
Wait, brother.
I love that you start with Seal. I love that you started with Seal. It brought back so many fond memories of some of my later teenage years, and when listening to Seal and putting that on in some of those times where you're just feeling more, juicy. The emotions are around, and you've really got those feels in the bones. And as a melancholic teenager and the rest, used to love this kind of music, or just kind of Seal. His songs just had that feeling of like a river, right? Like it just kind of carries you in this emotional kind of like just float in it. Which brings me to the introduction to today's energies, essentially. So for those that haven't watched our show before, we've been doing it every week, same time. You can join us live right now or watch it on the YouTube and interact on the chats by visiting cloutforum.org. So it's clout, CLOUTFORUM.org. Pop that in your browser and you'll see 3 links for Twitch, YouTube, or joining us live. And if you do, pop a comment in the chat, let us know you're there, and we'll be picking somebody to do a free Mayan Dreamspell reading for by the end. So with that out of the way, all the little technical bits, this show is about really dropping into the energies at the moment through the lens of the Mayan Dreamspell. So the ancient Maya looked at life through this lens of, they looked at the evolution of their consciousness through the lens of a 260-day calendar called the Mayan Dreamspell, which is made up of what we call 13-day wave spells. There's 20 of them. So every 13-day wave spell has a theme. And so we've touched on the yellow sun wave spell that we're in right now. We're in the 10th day. So if you want to know more about, go a deep dive into the overall wave spell, you can watch the last one that's on the same YouTube channel as this one. But today, let's go a little bit deeper. I was looking, Lee, at today's archetype being the 10th day. So each one of these days, right, as you know, represents a different aspect of creation. So when you build a house, you first have to dream up the house. You have to have the purpose of building a house, right? That's the very first step of a wave spell. And then you have to work out the challenges. That's the second step. And then you have to bond your service and commit yourself to doing it. That's the third step. And so as we go through these steps, if you contemplate the archetypes, you start getting a lot of clues as to what does it take to really manifest into reality whatever theme we're working on. And so in this wave spell, we're working on sovereignty. We're working on enlightenment. We're working on what does it take to set the sun inside of you on fire without needing permission, without being given that okay from the world. And what I love about this, Lee, is when you drop into it, for us here in the Philippines and Australia, we're in the red planetary moon. And, if you're over in the States or somewhere else, then you'll be moving into that as you come into your own Tuesday. And this red planetary moon energy, I just want to read this little affirmation. I perfect in order to purify, producing flow. I seal the process of universal water with a planetary tone of manifestation. I am guided by the power of navigation. And when I was dropping into this, Lee, I've got these beautiful soft rains outside, and I drop my boy at school, and there's just a gentle wind and the trees blowing, and you're just watching how the trees and the new saplings and all the new growth here in spring, even though it's a very wintry day, is just flowing with the wind, not resisting it, not fighting it. And it made me think of, someone once said that all truth in the world is a paradox. If it's not a paradox, it's not truth. And I thought that was a powerful contemplation. And what came up for me, this red planetary moon, is, it is a very feminine energy, right? It's very much about flow. It's about allowing the river of life to carry you and listening carefully to the synchronicities, guiding through hypersensitivity to these energies as opposed to blocking them out, which is a very different energy to the yellow sun in some ways, which is very strong. It's about being bold in your light, shining and being empowered. And it really highlights this idea of, that the feminine will lead the world, right? This idea that the feminine nature, the nature of flow, people might know this as the flow state in some of your work. You might know it in lots of other ways of just if you're into extreme sports and things, you might say, oh, I was in the zone. That's when you're in the flow state. And so I was really just feeling into this importance that often when we feel like we need to stand and in our own power, I think a lot of people can misunderstand that as thinking, I need to be strong. I need to be mean. I need to be tough. I need, like when I was a kid, I remember, they'd say, oh, toughen up, kid, don't cry, toughen up. And the paradox here is that in order to be in your own power, to achieve that kind of enlightenment where your sun is shining, it's important to actually go the other direction. It's not about becoming strong and forceful and brute, but rather becoming soft, becoming compassionate, opening your heart even when it hurts, and being able to stay strong in your light, to shine your light into those dark places that get opened when that happens. And instead of letting your left brain go, all right, I've got it from here. I'll protect you. I'll make this happen. I'll manifest this. I'll do it, which is that very masculine archetype, which has its place, but it needs to be guided first by the feminine. It needs to be guided by the flow of life, right? And so it's really I was just really feeling today that feeling of just trusting and surrendering in these waters as they wash down, because these waters, that emotion, that purification, that flow, that scary feeling, especially for a lot of men, when emotion is really flowing, it feels uncontrollable. There's nothing I can do about controlling it. We can control our outside world. We can control who we relate to. We can control what we do out there. We can control all those things, but my emotions, can't control that. And that's terrifying for a lot of us that are used to finding our safety and control. It's actually scary. And so feeling today that real embrace of just trusting in that, even if it's scary, like think of it as an exhilarating roller coaster ride that you don't know where it's going. And you can save that left brain, masculine, analytical for when you need it, for when it's time to take an action. But until then, really learning to just trust that if you have a lot of emotions coming up during this time, if there's a lot of triggers, then that's a blessing. Because as, Leonard Cohen would say, that's how the light gets in. There's cracks in everything. And so this yellow sun, I know I've seen myself, a lot of people have very bold, like crushes together that have cracked open things. And literally men crying together and hugging after it. Like I'm getting a tear even thinking about the beauty of that wildness. And so that's really what I'm sitting with today, is that it's not always pretty awakening. It's gritty, but it's beautiful, just like childbirth.
Thank you for sharing your contemplations on this red planetary moon day. And it's also I would say the word would be interesting, but beautiful, that today is the day of the moon within the sun wave spell. So you're feeling perhaps, again, what we share here in Satsang for the Soul are personal contemplations on the Mayan Dreamspell or the 13 moon dream spell. And it is an invitation to feel the energies of the day for yourself. You can listen into what we are saying and have your own experience of the day. And so for me, what this day is bringing up in my space, or when I feel into it, is planetary day is the perfection. It's day of manifestation. And on the 10th day, it's the day that it's produced in its perfect form in the physical, the material plane here in the realm of the body. And the perfection that we feel is opening us to a sense of flow, like what you're saying, Mark. And that is because when we open up to the light, when we have more light coming in, light meaning information, We have the light of the sun that carries a lot of codes that we can receive in our DNA, on that very subtle level, whether we see it, understand it or not. Even if the sun is not there, there's infrared coming from the sun in the morning. So even when you go out, you really receive these things. And the information that we receive in our lives takes us out of the darkness of ignorance. And when we are informed, we can make better choices in our life, making way to being sovereign. Because now we're making informed choices. We're not just making choices from the dark. This is for me what the yellow sun represents, is reclaiming our independence by also being a vessel that receives the light, information, truly informed, the highest information that is possible to you. And not because it's being given to you, but because the sun is a cosmic father archetype, which is also the young energy in the yin yang. It's about outwardly going for it. So you're not just there sitting wishing that information would come to you from the sky, but you're also actively seeking, okay, what are areas in my life right now that needs a little bit of light? And I invite you to think about a particular area in your life where you feel like, oh, I'm stuck in this aspect of my life, whether is it abundance, or is it on an emotional level, or is it on a spiritual level? Because once you bring your awareness to what area that is that you're having a hard time, then you can actively seek out the information that can guide you out of that darkness, out of that rut. And this is really what um, guru, the teachers, there's so many spiritual teachers on the planet. There's so many teachers on the planet. There's so many teachings out there and different perspectives of the truth. And that's what the guru in Sanskrit, Sanskrit is one of the ancient languages on the planet. And it's all about vibrations. And the guru, this word guru, and also in the Philippines, in Tagalog, means teacher. When we say guru, it's for us, it means teacher. And guru in Sanskrit is the same, teacher, guru, the one who takes you out of the darkness into the light. And this is also our inner guru, not just an outward guru, but an information that can bring us out of the darkness of ignorance into the light. And I feel that perhaps we are so ready on the planet right now to really complete living in the dark ages. And let's contemplate about what that means. What does living in the dark ages mean? Could it be that up to now we are so technologically advanced, we can send people up to space for 10 minutes that costs money that can feed thousands of people? We are so technologically advanced in our ways, yet the way we think is still so primitive. Maybe. Don't take my word for it. So how can we really take humanity forward into the light, the new age, where we can see each other as beacons of light? And this is what the sun represents for me, the light, that pure light, purely informing all of our energy systems, our chakras, giving us the information we need, the coding we need to awaken memories in ourselves that already understands how to live a life harmony and in harmony with all beings. And I think that's maybe that's what light means. And maybe that's what the sun teaches. The sun is independent, doesn't need anything. It shines its light, but at the same time, it's also not favoring anyone. It's not, the sun doesn't say like, oh, you're a bad person. You don't deserve the sunlight today. It's compassionate in the sense that it's inclusive. it's masculine, but it's feminine at the same time. The expression is masculine, but the essence of it, of compassion, touches up on the strength of the yellow sun, which is its polar opposite is the dog. It's all about the heart, love. How does it mean to be really sovereign but and independent, but at the same time being so giving and not just taking everything for ourselves? Oh, this is a lot of money. I'm just gonna have this for myself. Actually, I was watching this show called Billions last night. So many seasons of it. Um, and it was interesting. I just thought about that line that the person said. Uh, what is the purpose of, uh, accumulating a lot of money? It's just gluttony in a sense if it's never ending. And this person that was telling him this, he says, that was my sickness, having a lot of money. And you know what's the cure? Giving it away. Says, I remember the first time I made my $1 million. That feeling, I never got that feeling again. No matter how much money I continue to make, I just earn it all. And I reclaimed that feeling when I started to share that and give that away, when I started my organization. And so this is something that I wanted to share, in terms of the son, the masculine, the dad, like the father archetype also that we see in humanity that goes out there and is so selfless. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to go out there and hunt. And I'll bring that back to my house, to my village, and feed my family. It's the share.
So much juicy topics in there. So many amazing little. I appreciate that. And I appreciate
stream.
What's that?
It's just that stream.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were sharing, it's interesting when you bring teaching, the teacher, you talk about guru and the teacher, and it was kind of really interesting as I stopped for a second and thought, because I contemplate a lot education, and what is the most appropriate way for us to run education in the world, and schooling and all these things, and what's the purpose of it, and what do we truly want to achieve out of, like, for example, a child's primary school, high school years? What's the actual outcome? And I was thinking about this, Lee, and looking at it, like looking at all the things they study, all the things I studied in high school, and what they, and you think, there's that old cliche everyone always says, it's like, oh, well, when have you ever used any of that information? And normally if you have used it, you relearned it, right? You relearned it on the job, or you went to university and you did a refresher course and you learned it again and different things. And so it took me down this rabbit hole of thinking, okay, so then the prime goal of these schooling systems should really be to learn how to learn and how to be discerning in your learning, so that you can make sure that you're learning to investigate and cultivate and develop thoughts for yourself, as opposed to just mimicking and replicating what everyone else says. And so it's interesting when you're saying that I'm just kind of having these connections of really seeing this yellow sun aspect of, the importance of light, being able to receive light information, and that information opens up and puts light into dark areas within us that where insecurities hide and different things hide. And a lot of people will have probably experienced this right now out there in the world, that there's a lot of challenging conversations to be had, right? There's a lot of division at the moment between everyone's perspectives on the storyline of what's happening and how it's playing. And wherever I see those conversations trying to happen, it's like each person is trying to convince the other person of their perspective, but they're not willing to receive the light of the other person. They're not willing to receive the information of the other person and contemplate it. So it's almost like, as you were saying, it's kind of, I see this visual of when we try to talk to each other, and we try to educate each other, that's a horrible way of saying it, but we try to share information to try and align towards truth. It's important that there's a circuit open where there's a giving and receiving of that information, and then using discernment to decide what you will keep and stitch into your own storyline, and what you will let just flow past you without needing to have to throw it at them or reject it, but you can actually listen to it still. And that then took me on the next kind of pivot with that, Lee, where I started thinking, so why is it's so hard? Like in school, I know I've seen Felix, my son, when there'll be a kind of something in maths where, I'm sure everyone's had this experience where he just can't understand it. And I would try and explain it. And then I realized the problem wasn't the way it was being explained or the information itself. It was the fear and the insecurity he was feeling about never being able to understand it. It was the fear and insecurity of feeling that he's not smart because he can't understand it and someone else could. There's all these fears and insecurities that were inside him that were putting up these defense mechanisms that were preventing him from receiving the information that would allow him to understand it. And then I started thinking, some conversations I had with my father about, COVID and vaccines and different things. And I saw this intense fear that's being spread, by different governments, social media, mainstream media, and they all have a good I can't say they have a good intention, but you could argue there's a good intention for trying to scare people into doing the right thing. But this approach that's being taken to try and scare people into doing the right thing, it does the same thing as it mass did to Felix in that moment. They become scared that that something's fear starts up. So their defenses come up. So they can't even receive the information and be discerning. Instead, they just kind of get it put into their survival brain in the back part, through fear. And when you then try to have a conversation with somebody, the fear triggers. And if that fear is triggered, you're going to just get the parroting of information from all sides, not just one. It's like all of them. And no one can have a conversation. That information cannot be transmitted. So we can't enlighten each other and help support that process, because all of us have a little something different, a different perspective that can help us to really learn and to grow and to become that enlightened father figure, right, in our own worlds. And so that's where it really comes to see the role of that white dog archetype, this antipode that challenges to strengthen the sun, is if you want to learn, you have to give yourself compassionate space. You need compassion from yourself. And if you want to teach others, then you need to have compassion for them and understanding of where they're coming from. You have to be willing to listen, to receive, because if you won't, why should they? How can they feel safe if you have your walls up? And so, I really appreciate what you brought through, Lee, because it just helped me stitch that together in my own head a little bit more.
You're giving me thoughts to really also bounce around in my head with the things that you said. I think also, I wanted to add about the guru. And I really resonate with this. A real guru will lead you to your own self and not to himself or herself. That sense of discipleship or teacher-student, when you recognize that you're not being given information so you can worship a person outside of yourself, but rather bring you to worship your own self, that's a real guru. The others are just gurus in robe clothing.
They're cult figures.
And yes.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's so much that you said too, in terms of information and the way it's being given to us. And I, from what I can absorb or receive from what you mentioned, we're talking about the opposing side of vaccine, to get vaccinated or not vaccinated. We have forgotten how to have conversations we have just been so used to one person doing the talking, and I'm just going to tell you what it is. And so when we have something to say, we kind of act the way that we understand how the others act, like what we see in TV, the news, in uh, authoritative figures.
Mm.
We are still coming out of a generation who were silenced by their parents. I think people that are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, these are our grandmothers or great grandmothers. They lived in a generation where you can't speak at a dining table, you can't voice out your feelings, you can't even sing. When you sit there, you be quiet, you just listen
Mm.
to me. I am your mother, I am your father. You cannot um, argue with me, because what I say goes. That's the generation of those people. And then you have the next generation, kind of slightly improved from that, because they grew up in the war. It's cold, and no sense of emotion and connection to your children. And then you have another generation, and then we are seeing a generation that's super loving to their kids, to a point that it's not healthy. They call them the helicopter moms. You're just
Mm.
hovering over everything. I don't want you to get hurt, I don't want you to get any bacteria, I don't want you to get dirty. So, to extremes, right? So I think we have forgotten how to come into balance with the speaking, because you have a generation who never spoke, and now you have a generation who's super outspoken but so disrespectful. I'm not
Mm.
generalizing everything, but just because you have something to say doesn't mean that you can also just blurt it out without thinking about it, and that the whole world is your audience.
Mm.
um yeah, the art of conversation is an art. It is an art.
Ah, it really is. It really is an art
you,
form,
you have
and
to
you're
have the
right.
willingness. Yeah, like you say, with the yellow sun, you have to have the strength of the sun, which is also its challenge, is to learn how to open your heart.
Mm. And
And
it's
so when we
yeah.
come into a conversation,
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So when we come into a conversation and we approach it with an intention that I'm here to listen, and we just come into a conversation and we're here to share what we observe and what is our truth, then we will achieve a perhaps we will achieve a more harmonious way of relating to each other when we start with an
Mm.
intention. But the thing is, I think a lot of people are just conversing online and social media, and it always just ends up, that's not the platform to really have this kind of conversations. But there are some really amazing conversations as well that we are seeing. It's just one of those lengthy ones, of course, because you need to really explain your point, your perspective.
Yeah, it can't be done
I
in a
think,
Twitter.
yeah. And so, with the whole vaccine, and to vaccinate and not vaccinate, I think um there are, like you say, there are some good ones, good intention, but I think the delivery is still in the dark ages. And which, what I mean is that the delivery, whether it's good for us or would be good for the greater whole, to vaccinate, I mean, the way it's being imposed is not good. It's very masculine and it's oppressive, because we're mandating. We're just like, I'm gonna do this. This is what you need to
Mm.
do against your will. When, in my personal opinion, and this is my opinion, um, if we just look at the facts, and just look at the facts, really, because we don't know, and I guess this is me sharing my stance, we don't know what awaits us when we get infected by the virus. We don't know what awaits us if we vaccinate ourselves, and what happens later on, years down the line. And they're both, again, we've talked about this before, they are both coming from a sense of fear. The fear of what's going to happen to me when I get vaccinated, when I get the jab, and what they're putting in my system. And on the other side, there could be like, what's going to happen to me when I get COVID severely. Again, it's the yellow sun is about information. So why don't you go out there and get informed what happens to your body when you start to contract the virus and you're not vaccinated? How many days does it take for our immune system to build the defenses to fight the virus that's entering our system, right? So once we start to learn the information, we can start to make better choices. Okay, I don't really want to get vaccinated because I'd rather just trust my body, my immune system, and I'll go with that. Then that should be okay. There should not be, in my opinion, I have to always to say it's in my opinion, the patriarchal way of demanding is what really is turning people off, because we're so fed up by authority just telling us what to do and what not to do. So maybe even if we're thinking about vaccinating, we're just going to be like, no, no, because I don't want to follow somebody else's rule. Because it should be our own informed decision whether we want to do it or not. It should not be because whatever. But at the same time, the information is saying, I was also listening to information, and part of the things that made me do what I did was that, which is to get vaccinated, even though I believe in my own body and my immune system, because I also was I went out there to research and read what would be best for myself and what I think is best for me without anyone telling me you should do this, you
Mm.
know. And for me, I was doing it because the fact is that when here in the Philippines, when the hospitals release their data, which is not data from a news center or media or anything, it's their own personal data. People that are in critical conditions are the ones that are not vaccinated. There are no fully vaccinated people in the last phases. So for me, I look at that, that's data. So maybe there is some help that, okay, maybe there is some benefit for getting vaccinated. And to me, once you decide what you want to do, you don't want to get vaccinated, then just go full. Don't go for it half-ass. And for me, it's like when I decided, okay, I'm gonna get vaccinated because I know I can intentionally also clean my body with what I don't need from it, then take what is good for me. Once you decide, leave the fear at the door. You have no room for any other thing anymore because you're already there. And I think the invitation is get informed and know where you are getting your information sources. There's
Mm.
nothing more dangerous than getting information that you think is the right information, but it's only leading you to make the wrong decision about yourself. So tune into our body, red moon, tune into your own flow, feel into your physical vessel, do muscle testing. Is this medicine good for me? Your body will tell you. Is this activity good for me? Is this food good for me? Is this vaccine good for me? If it's not, don't do it. But this is our hope, the feminine aspect. And when we say feminine, it's not about being a woman, because men can have such beautiful feminine side. We all have feminine and masculine aspect inside of us, but the feminine aspect that we are starting to really see expressed in the world, in the greater world, is this sense of inclusivity, compassionate, understanding, soft leadership. Firm, but not oppressive, not dictatorial. Is that a word?
It's pretty close to a word, I'm pretty sure.
So yeah, the
Yeah.
feminine way.
Mm. And Lee, this is probably one of the most heated topics you could ever talk about publicly right now. Like, this is what's really interesting. Like on YouTube, like these topics, people are sidestepping, avoiding, and all these different things. And I love that you are comfortable they're speaking and sharing, right? And I think that's the important part, is that this is how we should be able to have conversation. I could imagine someone watching who has a very different perspective could right now have some emotion building in their body, even rage possibly of everything they're projecting outwardly. And my invitation to anyone in that situation is to breathe deep into that rage or that emotion or whatever's coming up when you get into these provocative conversations. Breathe deep and don't react. Don't yell. Don't scream at the person. Don't start trying to convince them that they're wrong. But breathe deep and follow that feeling inward. Because like you say, Lee, feel into why. What is it in you that feels threatened by that? Where is it coming from? Is it real? Is this person that you want to yell at or that you might have a thing with or you might want to convince? Do they have that power over you? Is it them that you need to have a fight with? You know, it's like really drop in and find out what is the insecurity? What is the fear that's being triggered? Because we should be able to, theoretically, as functioning humans with emotional regulation in safe environments, be able to have conversations like you and I are doing, right? And for absolute transparency, I'm a little bit on the other side. I haven't had the vaccine, and I have very serious issues with mandating and anything that takes part in that. I have a lot of issues with the information, the quality of information that's being provided, the way information is being censored, and that very masculine approach to information. And so for me personally, I personally haven't had the feeling of having enough information either way yet to call anything for certain. So I still sit in the, I don't know, but I'm not going to be brute forced into anything. That's my line inside me that says, but that's my feeling, right? Yes. And so it's important that we can talk to each other and we don't have that feeling of needing to convince each other otherwise, right? But then at the same time, like one of the things I've seen, and this is a really important thing that you're bringing up here, you know, it's super relevant, really. I mean, everyone is having these conversations online, right? Like you're saying, it's happening on Facebook, it's happening on Twitter, it's happening on all these places where people feel safe, even though they're not really, you know, like physically they're safe, but emotionally and mentally it's causing all kinds of psychosis. But it's all because there's no real connection. It's just words that are being interpreted. Because when you put a post up on Facebook or Twitter or one of these social media platforms, when people read that, they're not reading it with your history, your background, your mindset, your thoughts. So 10 words can mean a million things to different people. They hear it through their own fear spectrum. And then you argue with them about what they say back to you. And really, it's not even about what you said. And so many of these things online, they're not even discussions. They're not debates. They're basically just throwing their shit against the wall, you know, and just hoping something sticks, right? Yet, paradoxically, in real life, where, you know, is where we need to have that conversation, I find it really hard to find anyone willing to talk to me about it calmly from different perspectives. The only ones who would want to talk with me about it are the ones who agree with my perspective. And I don't want to have those conversations. We're not trying to create cults. It's like, I want to refine my belief. I want to know, am I right in these things? Like, where am I wrong? Point out to me where I'm wrong, but don't be aggressive. But first listen to what I say so you understand what I'm trying to say. Because otherwise, how can you help me find out where I'm wrong if you haven't even listened to where I am? And maybe some of what I say is right. Maybe some of what you say is right. And by having a conversation and allowing that flow, and whenever the emotion comes, just hold it internally. It's not, if I have a trigger, for example, Lee, from something, if you say something, that's not your responsibility to buffer. And part of the danger of the censorship kind of model we're going with, this very masculine controlling of society, is kind of saying that it is. It's kind of saying that it's your responsibility that I don't get triggered by your differing perspective. And it doesn't take much physics and mathematics to work out, and psychology. That is a disaster waiting to happen, right? Because we lack connection to humanity, to that compassion when that begins. And whatever happens going forwards, one of the things that I find is one of the big problems in these conversations is a bit like when you set intention coming in. Also, when you set intention for what you're trying to, because people come in wanting to convince each other, right? They're like, I'm right, I want to convince you. And fair enough, because if you see someone who seems to be doing something that you genuinely believe is dangerous and you love them, they are your family, they are your people. If you have deep care for these people in your world, for humanity even, then of course there'll be a part of you that wants to save them, wants to fix it. But it's not our job. It's not our job to go convincing everyone else. Like, we have to actually, and even if it was, even if you were 100% correct, you knew it for certain, and the other person, what they were doing was completely the wrong thing, even if that is the case, you have to think, is your intention to help support that person to make a better decision? Or is your intention to push them into a corner until they have to say you're right or punch you or run away? Like, what is your intention? Because if your intention is genuinely to influence somebody with your wisdom, to help them to make a better decision that you feel is a better decision, then when you set your intention further ahead at what the bigger goal is, then we can have more patience and time to listen to the smaller things. It's a bit like riding a motorbike, right? Like, I'm a big fan of motorcycles. I highly recommend you don't ever ride them, and no one ride them. Like, only if you're willing to take that risk, go for it. I love them. When you're riding a motorcycle, one of the first lessons I learned when I got my learner's permit was the instructor was saying to me, don't look at the road. Don't look at the wheel. Don't look down when you're sitting on a motorcycle right in front of you. Keep your eyes ahead at where you're going. Because where your eyes go, your body, what do you call that? Your center of gravity will follow. So if I look to the right, my body naturally pulls to the right. If I look to the left, and I did this on the motorcycle, and just watch, it's amazing to see how much where you put your attention directs where you naturally begin to magnetize. And if you're magnetizing on trying to win an argument or win a discussion, if that's what you're kind of focusing on, then you're going to magnetize competitiveness, a competition, right? A fight. But when you set your target ahead, you can stay much more grounded, much more balanced. And you can check yourself as well. Do I actually have a good intention here? Like, am I coming into this to actually try and get it better for both of us? Or is this just because I want to defend myself? And by really being a bit more clear on that.
I think if we just drop the feeling of, if you're not with me, then you're against me kind of mentality, we would have a better online atmosphere. You know, just because somebody's speaking something that is not your side of the coin doesn't mean they're against that. Like, for me, I've chosen the side to get vaccinated, not because somebody told me to, but because it's my sovereign decision. I don't do it because anybody has told me to. I felt in myself that it would be good for me to do that. And just because I did that doesn't mean that I hate people who says I don't want to get vaccinated. I mean, I don't know their story. Some people really can't get vaccinated because they're compromised, or they can't, or they don't want to. And that should be okay. That should be okay. Again, if we don't have this agenda of converting others to think the way we do, then it would be a more harmonious place. And this is my experience recently is like, here in the Philippines, we are going to have our presidential election next year. And this is also politics, religion, money. These are like taboo topics to talk about. And I love what I read before, you know, when people say there's a reason why you don't talk about these things. But I love what I read that says, no, it's not because we shouldn't talk about politics, religion, and money. We should learn how to have a conversation about politics, religion, and money without it being that way. that it has always been in the future. It doesn't have to be awkward. It doesn't have to be combative. It doesn't have to be a war of words. And I
Mm.
really believe that, and so recently, people have announced their candidacy, and I've made a bold decision to um, express who I'm supporting. And that was like an invitation for a lot of people to disagree with my choice, and some are very, very rude. And for me,
Mm.
I really mentioned in my post that, this is not a post bashing somebody else. This is a post of support for one person. I'm not here to talk badly about another candidate, but I'm here to share what I do like about this other candidate that I'm
Mm.
supporting. So I said, if you're coming in here in my page commenting rude comments, I said, and if one of those reaction, whether you love it, like it, and the haha, and then the sad, and then the wow thing, I said, if you comment haha on my post, that activates the block button on my page. And I've never done this before, in my, I mean, I could care less. But I think also I'm coming to a point where I'm also standing up against bully online. Some people, I guess, I've left some comments there that are, people who are not supporting the person I'm supporting, but they're very respectful of my choice. And I love that because it's showing people a different way to converse and communicate. We don't have to go down the drain of violence and saying all these harmful words. And actually, I said, if you're coming in here, my public Facebook page, um, and you're going to be here leaving words, comments that are uh, just rude. Sorry, did you lose me?
You're back on. I was just starting my little network tracker just to double check.
Uh,
But we heard your words. They came through.
All right, wonderful. Well, anyway, I was just saying that the yellow sun archetype, as well as like taking that sovereignty, your own sovereignty, for me, it's like not being afraid to speak up. I don't have to convert you to my way of thinking, and that's not my intention. But if you come in here and you talk to me in this way, you don't deserve my energy. Don't
Mm.
mess with me, in a sense that it's not because I'm going to do anything to you, but you do that, the consequence of that is you have no access to me. I do my musical offerings in my page. I give a lot of things to the people that are following me. And if you're coming in here and disrespecting me, you get no access. And that's where we need to
Absolutely.
really draw some boundaries as well, like in this online space. I can engage in a nice, debate or conversation. If you have an opposing views with mine, that's fine. But when you
Mm-hmm.
start to go down and hit below the belt and say things, hurtful things, um, threaten things like that, that's not a conversation, and
Absolutely.
I'm not going to be a part of it.
Mm.
You can find somebody else to do that with, but not in my house. You get no access to me.
Yeah.
That's where I stand.
I love that, Lee. I love because really what you're saying is let's take responsibility for our own safety online. Let's actually, we so many will complain and scream and say something needs to be done, it needs to be fixed, it needs to be this, it needs to be that. And I remember so many times I used to sit there and think, do people not realize those three little dots usually looks like three little dots or something? You click that, and there's a block button right there. There's a hide button. You can hide the post, you can hide comments if they comment on your thing. So you don't even have to block them. You can hide them. But if they keep going, you can block them. It's like we have abilities. That's your responsibility to actually, but a lot of people feel like they're not allowed to. And I'm like, oh, you have to have, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech means that someone is free to express themselves. But if someone comes, very much as you're saying here, if someone comes to my house and they walk through my front door uninvited and they start abusing me and they start abusing my family and they start having, you could say, well, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech in their own world. In my domain, my house, my safe space. We have an agreement as a family to support each other, to care for each other. And when we don't get along so well, we take some space away from each other. We don't, stay in that brutal place. And we have that freedom. If we weren't able to have that freedom to decide what kind of people we want to engage with, then the world would be even worse, right? And so it's that part where it's finding that balance. And I think the healthy place, I love the way you say it, Lee, because I'm fairly similar. It's like, I don't mind if you think I'm crazy. I don't mind if you disagree with me. I don't mind any of those things. You can feel all that you like. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a storytelling performer, right? I don't take anything I say ever for truth. I hope you don't, right? But we have a right to be respectful to each other, to be respected. And if you don't respect me, then there's no need to engage with me for you, because it's not good for you either. Why would you engage with someone you don't respect with, right?
Yes.
So it's not about silencing the person. It's saying, I won't tolerate disrespect and abuse. And
yes.
I'm not going to educate you. I'm not going to force you. That's not my job.
Yes.
Karma,
yes,
life,
yes,
it'll
yes,
do
yes,
it for
yes,
you.
yes.
You know?
Oh my God. It's yes on all the things you're saying. Thank you for just putting it out there in such a clear and concise thought, which is don't tolerate disrespect. We have to learn how to engage with one another in a respectful way, despite our differences. And I invite different views from what I already have, because that's how we grow, that's how we learn. I don't want to look for people who always agree with me. I want to have a conversation with a person I don't agree with so I can see from another lens.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's how it should be.
That's how it should be.
Time slips
All right, my
by
dear.
so quickly.
I feel like that's a beautiful, beautiful little coming home point. Thank you for bringing that in. And thanks for, Lee, you have such a strength and a courage in the way you bring yourself to the world. And I admire that, because sometimes I find it hard to find someone that I can just be myself and not have to worry about being too delicate around topics, but being able to actually just explore them. And you're incredible. I love the way that you're willing, and you not only willing, you're the one that opens the door and steps through. So you're fantastic. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. We didn't get any comments on the chat or anything for a session. I know we got some dedicated followers who listen to the replay. Lots of love to you. Big thank you for watching. Chuck a comment under and we'll tune in. Also, Lee, I want to do a big shout out to Vasumi Jika, who Vasumi, our red rhythmic monkey, commented on one of our last YouTube videos, and I haven't replied. I've been mad busy last week, so I'm going to jump in there and reply to her today. So big shout out, Vasumi. We love you to pieces, and let's get you onto Big Cloud.
Let's get her, yes, and let's invite her in one of these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God, amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you for being here and joining us on a weekly satsang. This is it's been something I look forward to on a weekly basis. I want to leave you all with a song from Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young. And this is called Teach Your Children, and it's a classic, and the words still ring true in my heart. And if we want to change the world, teaching our children the way of harmony, the way of peace, the way of love, the way of beauty, the beauty way, the peaceful way, the way of harmony, is just what we need to focus on. Sometimes we cannot change, people that already have their minds set. But our children coming into the world are the new people that are going to be the next adults, the next lawmakers, the next leaders, the next thought leaders. So instead of initiating them to a system of parroting information in our education system, it is my prayer that we start to allow our children to teach us as well. Because the children coming into this world right now are probably more evolved than we are, spiritually speaking. And they will pave the way. And what we are here to do is support them, protect them, love them, care for them, allow them to express their own unique magic in the world. And if enough of us will do that, we will have a generation of unique, beautiful spirits doing their amazing divine work on this planet. Diversity is what nature teaches. Children well, their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they pick, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just to look at them aside and know they love you, and know they love you, and you of tender years can't know the fears that your elders grew by. So please help them with their youth. They seek the truth before they can die, and teach your parents well. Their children's hell will slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they picked, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just to look at them aside and know they love you, and know they love you. And know they love you. And the full circle of life, we look back to our elders and listen to their wisdom that will guide us in our future. And as we pass them on, we pass on the wisdom that shares love, harmony, compassion, cooperation, acceptance, diversity in the world, to our children and our children's children. And as we heal in the now moment all of those things from our past, may we only pass on what is good, what is benevolent, what is healing. And as we reach back into time, we will know that our own personal healing reaches the healing of the generations before